All right, so first, let's see how to create a scenario file. Even before we get into running the model, let's see how to create a scenario file. So in order to do that, there are two predefined scenarios in the model setup. As I mentioned, there's a base 2015 and forecast 2045, and the MAZ data. Both of these version files have the same MAZ data, and MAZ data has data for 3 standard years for 2015, 2030, and 2045. So currently, the scenarios that you can create using the current setup is only for these 3 years. If you want to create a scenario for any different year, then of course you would need data for that year and network for that year. So this is just to uh, for you to keep in mind when you're creating new scenarios that the data is available only for these 3 standard years. All right. So in order to create a new scenario, let's say you want to create a new 2015 scenario. The workflow for that is you would start with your an existing base version file, and then you can save that as, or you sort of create a copy of that file and then rename it to the new scenario that you want to create. And then after that, you can make the changes that the scenario requires. It could be changes to the network geometry, you're updating a roadway section, or it could be changes to the land use data, or it could be changes to public transit. So once you have made all those changes, next would be to add a scenario directory in the model setup, and then in the settings you got to change the scenario directory name. So I'll walk you through these steps. So let's quickly jump to the model directory here. And if you have downloaded that zip file, this is how the model directory would look. And you can go ahead and open the version file. I've already opened it here, but you can open it at your end. And then the first step is to save the base version file with a different file name. So this is where you find the save as option. Go to the file menu and then click on the save as menu item. And when you click, it opens this window. So usually, I would suggest always try to name files that are intuitive to understand. When you come back to that file, you should be able to understand which scenario that file represents. But for this training, I'm going to give it a very simple name. I'm just going to add underscore build to it, assuming that it's some sort of a build scenario. And then you can simply save. Just wait for it to save, and let's go back to the folder and check if the file was created or not. So now you see 3 version files in this folder. So this was the existing 2015 base version file, and then here is the new file that we created. And another thing to note here is always try to create scenarios using an unloaded file, if possible. It's just easier and it's less bulky, because if it's a loaded file, the file size would be much higher, and it will be, and then you don't want to carry over results from any of the previous scenarios in the new scenario that you're creating. So always try to create a scenario from a unloaded or unrun version file. All right, so once you have saved your base version file as a new version file, now would be the time to make changes that you intend to create a new scenario. So it could be, if you want to update the links, if you want to update a specific roadway section, we talked about some of those things, how to edit links or edit zone data and all of that. And we will be working in the second half of today's training. We'll be going through. We'll create some land use update and network update scenarios. So you we will talk about that in more detail, how to actually make changes to the network, or how to create new scenarios. But just to give you a rough idea about how you go about this process, at this stage, you will make changes to your um, whichever changes the scenario requires, changes to zones or links or any other network object. So let's assume that you are done with all your changes. So after that, the next step would be to create a scenario directory. So you would go to um, the scenarios directory, and then in that directory you see two subdirectories. So there's a subdirectory for the base 2015 scenario, and then there is another one for the 2045 forecast scenario. And now we are creating a build 2015 scenario. So easiest way to do this is to you can simply take the base 2015 directory, and you can create a copy of that here. And then you can rename this new directory to the scenario name that you want to give to your new scenario. So let's say we can give it a name called build 2015, and that's it. So you have created a new scenario directory, and because this is like unrun setup, all the folders pretty much are empty here, so you're simply copying over empty folder structure. Okay, so the first step would be to create this a new scenario directory, and after that go back to the version file, and let's go to the general model settings, and you can access that by going to list and then user defined tables and table entries. And by default it opens the first user defined table in alphabetical order. To go to settings, you can click on this button here and it would open this window. You can scroll through this and select settings, and then click on confirm selection. So it would open the settings user defined table. So let me just expand some of these columns so that we can see things more clear. Now you see here there are different types of settings, and the setting that we want to change here is the scenario directory. So remember, we copied this version file, right? So it still has all the settings from the base year scenario, but then we changed the name of the scenario now. So you would update this value here to build 2015, and assuming depending on what else you are changing in your scenario, you may want to update these settings. So let's say if you made any changes to the auxiliary models, or time periods are changing, or occupancy rates are different, or anything, or the year is different, then you may want to change other settings. But in this, for this example, we are assuming that none of this was changed, only there was a network change of some sort. So other changes need not be updated. And if your scenario changed any of the DSIM settings, then you would go to DSIM config and then update the settings as needed, if anything was changed here. All right, so once you have those are the two main settings that you might update, but you might update other settings too, depending on what the scenario requires. So let's say, let's open the procedure sequence for a second. And then to access general procedure settings, you can click on this icon here, or you can also go to calculate and then click on general procedure settings. So here you can access all the assignment and skimming settings. So, if you want to update the link PDFs for certain links, or you want to assign a different PDF to a certain link type, all those things could be changed here. So if your scenario requires any of such changes, you can come here and make all those updates. So once you have made all those updates, the last step would be to save the version file. And you can do that simply by, there's a save icon here on the toolbar, quick access toolbar, or you can go to file and then, click save. So usually if you go to click on the save icon here, it would show this warning saying, do you want to replace the existing file or not? So you can say replace, click on replace file, and then, it would replace and save it. So once it is saved, then you can go ahead and run the model. So we'll talk about how to run the model in a second, but this is how you would create a new scenario.